In section 1.4, our goal is to rewrite and evaluate formulas and equations. This page, you'll see a bunch of formulas. Most of them you should know. I'm going to put a checkbox next to the ones that I think are worthy of memorization or things that you should already have memorized. There's not really a lot to say about most of these, other than you should know them. The only one that I don't really think is important is converting temperature from Fahrenheit to Celsius and vice versa. The only reason that's even there, I think, is because it shows up in an example. So our first example says solve the formula C equals 2 pi r for r. So we're going to do that. We know C equals 2 pi r. It's a one-step process to get r by itself. Divide both sides by 2 pi. The problem goes on to say, find the radius of a circle with circumference 44 inches. So we have to plug 44 in for C. And this is a good practice for your calculator. Make sure you can divide that correctly. If you don't get the same answer as me, you need to figure out what you did wrong. If you can't, come see me. Get approximately 7 inches when you put that in your calculator. Use the pi button if you're using your calculator. Do not type 3.14. Makes your answer a little less accurate. At this point, you can pause the video and try the guided practice, or you can do those later. Next problem says solve the formula P equals 2L plus 2W for W. So let's just do that before we even read any further. After we do that, it says find the width of a rectangle with length 12 and perimeter 41. So we have to plug in these numbers in the right spots for P and L. Once we do that, we'll get our width. We end up with 8.5 meters for our width. At this point, you can pause the video and try these on your own, or you can wait until later to do that. Next problem says solve for y. Before I even read any further, I'm just going to solve for y. One thing to note is when I divided both sides by -4, I changed the sign of everything on top. That way I could write +4 on the bottom. It's not necessary, it's just kind of standard. It would have also been acceptable to have an answer that looks like this. Either one of those answers is fine. The problem goes on to say, find the value of y when x equals -5. So I'm going to use some function notation here. I'm saying I want to know y when x is -5. So I plug that in. I use my order of operations to simplify that, and I end up with -13. Make sure you can get that -13 on your own. This one's a little trickier. So solve 2y plus xy equals 6 for y. Notice we have two y's. It's a little harder to get y by itself. The trick here is to put everything that has a y on one side of the equal sign, which is already done, and then we can factor out the y. So we take out the y, we're left with 2 plus x. Now it's one more step to get y by itself. That step is divide by 2 plus x. We'll be doing stuff like this a lot more later. It goes further to say, find the value of y when x equals -3. So I'm saying I want y when x is -3. And using my order of operations, we should be able to get -6 without too much difficulty. At this point, you can pause the video and try these on your own, or do that later. Last example for this lesson. Word problem. A video store rents new movies for one price and old movies for a lower price, as shown at the right. So we see our new releases are $5, older movies are $3. Write an equation that represents the store's monthly revenue. Sounds like we're going to have to come up with some variables. I'll call this part A. We want monthly revenue, so we should say we should get a variable for revenue. And that revenue is going to depend on how many new movies we rent, so we need a variable for that. And we're going to need to know how many used movies we rent. And that gives us our total revenue. Not total profit, but total revenue. Once we've defined these variables, it's not too hard to come up with an equation. Our total revenue is going to be the number of new movies we rented times how much we get. We get $5, so 5x plus amount we get per used movie times number of used movies. It's 3 times y. So that gives us an equation that has the store's revenue. What I'm going to call part B says solve the revenue equation for the variable representing new movies rented. It sounds like we need to solve for x. Very similar to what we did on the previous example. So we've got our equation for x solved, number of new releases rented. Part C, we now know that the owner wants $12,000 in revenue per month. How many new movies must be rented if the number of older movies rented is 500 or 1,000? Sounds like we've got 2 problems to figure out. We know revenue is going to equal 12,000. Now we've got 2 problems to do. For both of those problems, we're going to say x equals 12,000 minus 3y over 5. First, we're going to plug in 500 for y, then we're going to plug in 1,000 for y. And what this will tell us is how many new movies have to be rented if this many used movies are rented. Obviously, we should have a bigger number for the first one. Because we're not renting as many used movies, we need to rent out more new movies. So plug these into the equation, see if you get the same numbers I get. If you're not getting these same numbers, go back and check your calculations. Be sure you're using the order of operations correctly. That's it for this lesson.